My cat is eating, so you're probably hearing some munching. I'm sorry, I've just been spiraling into everyday life and not trying to get overwhelmed by anxiety and by depressing thoughts, because that's what I usually fall into. I'm a very anxious person and I tend to get overwhelmed. And there's been the heat, I've been quite busy with my thoughts, with work, with my studies, and life passes by very quickly. Anyway, I'm here. I hope you're doing well, and I hope that you're not suffering from the heat if you're watching this in summer. I've unfortunately seen the news. There have been floodings in many countries and fires, so that is quite depressing, to be fair. Let's try to think about something else. Today's video will be focused on a painting that is quite famous. At least it definitely got famous on TikTok for a while, and it's been around for a minute. That is the Execution of Lady Jane Grey by Paul de la Roche, a French painter. It was completed in 1833. I'll go a bit more into details later about the reasons why I've chosen this painting, and I'll also talk about what it depicts, like what it visually depicts and what it undermines, what it conveys on a more symbolic level, and the history behind it, things like that. But to begin with, if you're familiar with these videos, I usually try to show you a tea I've been loving, and this one is quite recent. This is a rooibos, a Tahitian rooibos. It has vanilla and almond flavors. It's very good, it's caffeine free. Let's begin first of all with the reasons why I've chosen this painting. To be fair, I first knew about painting thanks to TikTok, because for a while I had on my For You page content about art pieces, artworks, mythology and stuff. I'll try to insert some clips from TikToks that you can find on the platform that use that painting. And of course, this is a painting that depicts a very tragic scene, or at least it shows the premises of a tragic event. So that is quite of an impressive painting to see. I kept that frame in a tiny spot of my mind, of my brain, just hiding in there in a very tiny corner of my brain. If you've seen my vlogs from the beginning of March this year, you know that I've been to England. So I've been to Brighton for a couple of days, and after I went to London, and during my London trip I visited the National Gallery Museum, and in that museum there is the painting. I actually did not remember that it was there, so that was quite a surprise, a pleasant surprise. I was flabbergasted by how gigantic that painting was. That frame is massive, it's very long and very large, so that leaves quite an impression to see it in real life. And there are so much details, it's so well painted. As I'll mention later, there seems to be like light on Lady Jane, so your attention goes on that person at the very center almost of the painting, and you're just sucked into the matter of that painting. On the left, on her right, there are two women who look very sad. Even I was gonna say the butcher, that's not his job. The executioner, the death reaper guy, looks quite So there's a whole combination of things that create a lingering atmosphere, if that makes sense. And as you know, if you've been to museums before, there's always, of course, the little label next to one painting, and it usually says the name of the painting, its artist, when it was completed, and usually there is also one or two sentences to add a bit more details to it, to complete it in some way. And the sentence was saying that Lady Jane Grey only reigned for 9 days, so it's left some sort of mystery in my mind and curiosity. Now let's actually talk about what the painting visually represents. So the painting depicts the last moments of Lady Jane Grey's life, the very moments before she got executed, beheaded. Well, this is at least an assumption from the painter and from what you could read in books and in records from that moment, because we can't be sure that the execution happened that way, and that there were the ladies on the side and the guy, the lieutenant helping Lady Jane, and yeah, can't be sure. This is a sort of romanticized portrayal of what happened. Lady Jane Grey was executed on the 12th of February 1554 by the guy, the executioner that is on her left. But again, we don't know what he actually looked like, and I'm not sure that you can find somewhere an actual depiction of what he really looked like. A lot of the time, the painters and the sculptors actually hired or just got models to use that as references for their works. So the executioner could have been like just a guy he knew of, but I'm not even sure of the accuracy of the lieutenant's appearance on the painting. I've not seen actual drawings of him, so I guess that Mr. De La Roche just assumed that he looked like that or picked someone's face. So the lieutenant I was mentioning is called John Bridges. He's the old guy who is sort of helping Lady Jane to find the wooden pedestal. That's not a pedestal, the wooden, what's the name of that? Is that the block? Oh well. Bridges was said to be a courtier. I don't know what that means. He was also an army officer and a politician. At that time, he was the lieutenant of the Tower of London, where Jane had been imprisoned and where she got executed. In the background on the right of Lady Jane, there are two women who look quite shattered by what's happening nearby. On one of the websites I've read, it was saying that one of the two women actually was like the nursemaid? Yeah, the nursemaid of Lady Jane when she was a kid, but I don't know if it's real or not, a real fact or not. As I said, Lieutenant John Bridges is sort of guiding Jane to find the block, the wooden thing. You can see that with the way he's holding her, the way he has his arms moving. The scene seems to be indoors. Well, at least the websites are not agreeing on that point. Some websites say that the scene depicted is indoors. Some say that they don't know, it might be outdoors and indoors. We don't really know where it actually is supposed to be. But what we know for sure is, in real life, the execution happened outdoors. There, on the painting, we can see in the background a sort of Romanesque architecture. The background is quite dark, the light is very dim, the light is quite focused on Lady Jane and the lieutenant in the foreground, so that sort of environment makes us think of an indoors environment, but there's a reason why it's depicted that way, and I'll explain it to you later. Delaroche definitely had inspirations for that painting. Let's now focus our attention on the star of the frame, if I can say that. That is Lady Jane Grey. So she was Queen of England during only 9 days. What happened? Well, why was she on the throne to begin with? She was the daughter of the Marquis of Dorset. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And her father-in-law was a duke. The Duke of... that looks very hard to pronounce. Northumberland. And that guy was quite a sneaky guy. He wanted to gain more power through her, and in some way she was related also to the King Edward, the guy who was the king at the time. He was very young and he was very ill also. So the father-in-law was afraid to lose his privileges under the possible reign of another successor. That's why he pushed Edward VI to choose Jane as his successor. But you could ask, how did he manage to convince Edward VI to choose Jane? Well, she was the great-granddaughter of Henry the Eighth. Henry VIII. Jane was proclaimed queen in 1553 after the death of Edward VI, who, as I said, was really ill. He died at a very young age. So she got the crown in July 1553, but 9 days later she got arrested. Why was she arrested, you might say? Well, that's because of Mary Tudor. She was quite jealous of her crowning, of her being queen instead of her. So she tried to be a bit sneaky. You know how kings and queens were at the time, how the royal families were. They were very vicious and thirsty for blood, for blood first, but also for money and for fame and for power. Mary actually convinced a part of the population that Jane was just a traitor and that she was... oh my god, my cat is putting his tail in my tea. Mary tried to convince people that Jane was just a traitor and that she was not made for the throne. And because she was a Protestant and Mary was a Catholic, there was a whole conflict between the two faiths. Mary convinced the Catholic part of the population to overthrow Jane. Yeah, Mary was closer to Henry VIII than Jane, so she said that she was more legitimate to be the queen. So Jane got arrested 9 days after being proclaimed queen, and she got sent to the Tower of London, where she spent a lot of weeks and months. And even Jane's husband and father were imprisoned for treason charges. Well, Mary Tudor got what she wanted. She led a very special reign, but that's not the topic of that video. She got called the Bloody Mary. Let's continue now with the painter's inspirations. If you're familiar with art in general, you know well that it's quite uncommon for artists not to take inspiration from any other piece of art that ever existed before. There's always like some inspiration from previous artworks or real life things. So of course Paul Delaroche was painting with things in mind. I read on the National Gallery website that Paul Delaroche was quite used to the tableau vivant, and that is a type of drama, a type of play, a form of visual spectacle that was quite new at his time. A tableau vivant is a sort of living picture in which the actors, the decors, the costumes, the light are arranged in a particular way. The actors of tableau vivant were holding poses in silence. So it really is different than an actual play that you see at a theatre. And even at Paul's time, lights were used to amplify the wow effect of the scenes. So we can definitely feel that inspiration in that painting, because as I briefly said before, there seemed to be light focused, like a spotlight focused on Lady Jane and on the foreground people, and the background seems to be more dim, as if, yeah, it was a stage, the stage of the scene, the stage, that's not the correct word, the scene of a theatre. And also what contributes to that play-like atmosphere is the detail of a sort of step in the foreground. There's a line that indicates like a scene or just something more, something higher up. On top of that, Delaroche was quite common to the Comédie Française. It is a famous French play group. Not sure that it's labelled like that. And there he knew of Mademoiselle Anaïs, who was one of the actors, one of the comedians of the Comédie Française. There supposedly was a love affair between them. Written records actually say that she was used as a model for Lady Jane. There's been other paintings of Lady Jane, of her face, and the faces are not too far away from what Mademoiselle Anaïs looked like. There possibly is another source to his work, and that is another painting engraving depicting the execution of Mary Queen of Scots. It was painted by John Opie. Stance of Mary, Queen of the Scots, the stance of Lady Jane, the executioner, the axe, the white dress, bands, dead eye, and what else? The persons around, the persons who look devastated. There are tight similarities between the two artworks. And oh my god, there's one of my cat's hair. Wait, I'm on a mission. I'm fishing. I think I missed it. Oh my god. Okay, I think we're done. I moved the ball away from the edge of the table because I don't want him to put the tip of his tail again in my tea. In 1789 there was the French Revolution, and shortly after, the Queen and King of the time, that is Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, were beheaded. I'm just summarising the whole thing, but that's more complex than that. Those executions definitely left an imprint on the French people's minds, even if the executions were like asked by the population, the French population, and they were greatly welcomed. So Paul knew what he was doing by painting an execution, a beheading, even if it was actually portraying an old English event, British event. That frame definitely got its popularity among the French bourgeois, the French people, the French hierarchy. I've seen that it might have reminded the French of their recent past, or the recent past of their country. The painting was first shown in the French society, and then it was later sold to the British. The wooden block, that's just a tiny detail, but the wooden block on which Jane is to be beheaded is not historically accurate. That block actually resembles the wooden platforms that were used during the French Revolution's executions, so probably the ones of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. Now, I've written a list of assumptions about why the frame is still imprinted in people's minds even today. First of all, the facial traits of the people around. The executioner's face, the ladies in the back's face, and the way they are standing, and the one is sitting, devastated. The other one can't even look at the scene. The countenance of John Bridges and the mouth of Jane. It kind of creates compassion in some way. That's what I wanted to say before in the beginning of the video. That creates compassion, to me at least. Then again, second of all, there's an unfair aspect to it all, because Jane was so young and she was pushed to the throne by her father-in-law. I'm not even sure that she wanted to be queen. She was so young and she got thwarted by Mary Tudor, who was just jealous. Yeah, that's so unfair. And Delaroche even chose, it probably got inspired by the Mary Queen of the Scots painting, but it chose to make Jane wear a white dress. You know well that white as a colour symbolizes innocence, purity, and other very valuable, worthy traits. You might have heard my cat mewing. That's because there's a massive insect on the outside of the glassy doors. And among that compassionate atmosphere conveyed by the painting, there's John Bridges, who looks quite tender with Mary Jane, even if it's supposed to be like one of the chiefs of the Tower of London. So it's supposed to be, unfair and led by power and led by bloodthirst, things like that. He's supposed to be a bad guy, but there he seems to be reassuring. He's very soft with his hands, at least I think. He looks very tender and soft and delicate. If we take a step back from the actual frame, there might be actual facts that explain why people still talk about that frame today. To begin with, executions are major events that can be traumatizing to one's eyes. If I had to see an execution, I'd be traumatized myself. So this is a very peculiar topic to portray, for sure. And the frame is massive. As I said earlier, it's 246 centimeters long and 297 centimeters wide. So visually it is gigantic. The people almost are real life scaled. So that adds to the message it wants to convey and to the impression it leaves, I think. day you go to the National Gallery, if you've never been to the museum, you cannot not take a moment to look at the painting because of its size and because of everything I said before. By any case, I'm sure that the painting will still be famous in years to come. I'd advise you to go and see that painting for yourself in real life, because there's a real experience that is built when you see the thing by yourself and with your own eyes, if that makes sense. There's something missing for sure when you look at the thing online. I'll not really talk about genres because that was not something that I thought would be interesting with that painting. There were so many facts to talk about and to discuss about that were more interesting to me. I'll leave you there. I hope that my pronunciation was not too messy. I've not talked English since the last video I've recorded, and I actually try to talk by myself to practice my pronunciation, but that's not enough. And I sometimes try to read my books out loud in English to practice again, but that might not be enough. That's better to be recorded and to practice with recording videos. I wish you a great end of the day, a great week, a great night, and I'll see you very soon. Goodbye.